censorship. So if Trump is this big bad boogeyman, if they're comparing him to what happened with Hitler and these other countries, I don't see the censorship coming from the right. I see this coming from the leftist Democratic Liberal Progressive Party. I don't, if you think about it, this has got to be very concerning, by the way. That if you study the history of other countries that have fell into socialism and communism, these are indications of, where in certain countries, like, for example, North Korea, they disappear people. You're not allowed to have dissenting views at all against the government. This is why we have what makes America great, and you have things to still appreciate over here. We haven't got to the point yet, and I say yet. Imagine if you get a Kamala or Biden in office, or if you had a Hillary, by the way. We haven't got to the point yet, but I hear places like Australia, people had police showing up at the door on Sunday over a comment they made on somebody's social media post. This is very real. Remember the NBA had that situation, that controversy with China? And notice they went out of their way to speak up for Black Lives Matter and everything, but they shut down LeBron after he made the statements about what was going on in Hong Kong, that situation over there at the time. Why is that? You got to ask the question, shouldn't that be very hypocritical? Yes, there are injustices that do happen. I don't frown away. I've touched on that. I've addressed that. But we equally have to call out definitely both sides. And in the original description, I was putting it in the description for this video. I had to redo it because I couldn't see the title at first. But I had put in there how, from my observation, Democratic cities, or cities that are ran by Democrats, I noticed from years past, and I went over the situation that's happening here in Detroit, and saw in our local news stations from WXYZ Channel 7 that's running ABC, Scripps Howard. ABC is up under Disney. Then WDIV4, that's our NBC station, which I hear is owned by Comcast now. Then you have WDIV, Fox 2 News, by the way. They all covered the corruption scandals that was going on some years ago. I remember there was an investigative reporter named Charlie LaDuff that confronted Robert Ficano, the former Wayne County executive, by the way. Right around or after that situation when a former hip-hop mayor known as Kwame had went down. And then you had city council people. Remember when Monica Conyers here got caught? It was in the news when she called the city councilman Ken Cockrell, she called him Shrek. And that was a big controversy. I said, oh boy. And I said that they're supposed to be professional. And they got ghetto fabulous and just, we're at it, by the way. But this goes back. I had a lady when I went to an event, a Preppers Expo that a friend of mine invited me to a couple years ago, further up north in Michigan. It's like this annual Michigan Preppers event. And one of the booths that was set up, I was having a conversation with the lady there and found out that she grew up in the same neighborhood that I grew up in, one of the neighborhoods I grew up in on the west side of Detroit. And she told me, you know where that money is going to in the Detroit public school system, that is supposed to be going, why the reason why kids don't have textbooks and stuff like that, and it's being laundered into the Democratic Party. And it's also a reason why the school systems failed, why they had to bring in emergency financial managers. And I was told by a private source some years ago that one of my relatives actually informed me, but I was hearing about it back then, by the way, that someone that my relative knew who worked for the school board said former superintendent years ago, known as Superintendent Jefferson, had these Detroit public school officials were coming to work in limousines using, of course, the public schools taxpayer dollars, rely on the government funding and stuff like that, by the way. And you wonder why a lot of the schools had to close down. They went through a period with, they had to appoint these different emergency financial managers. You saw these press conferences. I noticed this symbiotic relationship is I don't think it's a coincidence. And I think some of this went on in my home city, Cleveland, by the way. I can confirm some of the mismanagement of city council, by the way, as far as, but if you look at other school systems that are failing and has a connection to the Democratic Party, by the way, look at also Baltimore, by the way. So that's why I said, in my humble opinion, the Republicans are not perfect, but however, they're the better option. And if I was a registered voter, this is why I no doubt would vote Republican, by the way. The Democrats don't allow you to have an opinion outside of the narrative or whatever they're pushing at the time. I feel like that's not right. And as I was saying earlier, how come I feel like we as black men, they're gonna vilify? I saw this happen when I brought up Killer Mike because of this situation with Cube is more reason why I left and I walked away from the Democratic Party, and I plan on never coming back. And I would encourage any black man, especially listening, and it goes for the sisters too. You know, why would you vote, go for the Democratic Party when you had Joe Biden supported the 1994 crime bill? They tried to cover a lot of this stuff up, by the way, but he was one of the main ones who lobbied for it. And then the news, the local news has this thing called fact check. And I can go through there and I can deconstruct that, and I can go in. I read what they had. I don't have it in front of me, by the way, but they had to basically admit it was so hardcore, they couldn't shine away from it. The only thing they were trying to say was that the crime went down. What's interesting is Biden and Kamala, different groups, bailed out a lot of the rioters, by the way, that rioted people's businesses and looted. A lot of them were bailed out of jail, prison, and crime went up all over the country. I admit the protests at first, they appeared to be peaceful when the George Floyd, after that incident first happened. I'm just saying, originally, then extremely, all of a sudden, it turned extremely violent, by the way. And then remember, protests broke out all across the country. These are before these other instances. And law enforcement could obviously tell from across the country, across the nation, that they're like, no, there's no way you can't tell me that this is not coordinated or pre-planned in some type of way. And then many law enforcement police chiefs admit what happened to George Floyd, it was wrong. They came out and said it. Detroit police chief was one of the first, if not the first in the nation, that came out and condemned that. But they faced this so-called activist group here called Detroit Will Breathe that wants to defund Project Greenlight, that wants to take the high definition cameras down, which the Detroit police chief has stated Project Greenlight has helped reduce the crime in the city by over 60%. This is a combination of carjackings that have taken place. They've included, you can look up, the video should still be on YouTube. Look up, if you don't know anything about Project Greenlight, it's where they tried to get these businesses to partner with the city to have these high definition cameras in gas stations and stores, because that's where a lot of these different crimes and instances were happening at. People were being robbed. I had a lady that a clerk that works at a gas station I would frequently visit, where I would get gas at for my personal vehicle, automobile, and she confirmed to me that the gas station right across the street from it, there was people being held up with, they had AK-47s there. It's a story I heard. The gas station right across the street, she was telling me that these people, they had AK-47s. By the way, this has got to stop. But if we want to see the black community get better and change, it has to start from somewhere. So I appreciate Ice Cube and others who have been fearless and had the balls to stand up and do what was necessary, that do care about the black community. Another thing I think is some BS that Cube is being attacked. And I will say, even on behalf of Jay-Z, by the way, I saw this happen after Jay-Z met with the commissioner, Roger Goodell, the NFL, whatever. He got a lot of backlash, by the way. It was black people calling him cooning and stuff like this. But you do have people, these guys are famous people in high positions of power that are trying to help the black community and or trying to bring about change in the ways that they can, and they still get vilified because they're meeting with white people, or they say working with the white man, you know. But what are they doing to help the problems, help solve the problems in the black community, by the way? You know, these people who criticize these people, because at the end of the day, my mentor used to tell me many years ago, he said, you want to be the solution to the problem, or you want to solve the problem. He said, it's three ways to solve a problem. You can run from it, you'll just be running from it. You can deal with the problem, you'll just be dealing with it, you'll be going through the stress. If you're afraid to solve it, you're afraid, you're scared, you're dealing with it, or you can solve it. And he said, I choose to solve it. So why not, why knock these people that are trying to do their level best? If you have a voice on the other side, just like Candace Owens, others, why not allow that person or that voice? You might not co-sign everything that they say. Doesn't mean that. But if they have a voice on the other side that can make things better, that can help assist, why not, allow them, give them a chance, by the way. You know what I'm saying? And another thing, Ice Cube was, people forget, he was involved in assisting with this situation years ago. Now, I don't remember too much about it. I have some, actually some, maybe quite a bit of memories dealing with it. But there was a situation in Louisiana some years ago with these boys, and I guess it was a part of Louisiana. It was called Jenna 6 or something like that. By the way, it was based on a city or town down there where these 6 young boys black boys were involved in a situation at a school where some of the other young boys, I guess in their class or somebody, had put nooses in the playground or whatever, and had maybe done some other things. And the internet wasn't as big as it was today. And I was told by a relative, and I followed the instructions and sent the chain, like a chain letter through email, which was very effective at the time before people started, using email, spamming a lot. But it was very effective. And the word got out, and believe it or not, Ice Cube, I heard, helped bust activists or different people down there to protest the incident. This was a genuine incident where these young men were facing a harsh form of racism at the school that they were at, by the way. Ice Cube was one of the ones who, looked out to show his love on behalf of the black community. There was even like a nationwide unofficial protest where all the black co-workers at, in parts of corporate America wore all black that day. And I heard that at the time, I was told white people, they didn't even know why. By the way, Ice Cube was one of the ones on the front lines, believe it or not. Back then, I remember that, is someone who generally cares about black people and is concerned. But he saw that this platinum plan that Trump had, where they want to make Juneteenth a holiday. I don't remember some of the other things from the bill, wants to help, get funding. I think like $500 billion to the black community, maybe in the form of businesses. I'm not sure. I don't know all the details, but he said it was similar to the contract with Black America, something else I guess he was part of or working on. So for all these people to call Ice Cube a coon, a Sambo, all these names and stuff like that, you're hypocrites. And I think you have another agenda that doesn't really have the black community's best interest at heart necessarily, by the way. I think it's a positive thing that if you have people out there who are willing to try to assist, even if they're on different party lines. By the way, it's called being bipartisan, when you can work with the opposing party on different bills or things. And this is long overdue, by the way. And what I was saying earlier, to kind of piggyback to the reason why a lot of African American black voters switched over to the Democratic Party in the 60s was because of Kennedy. I had this confirmed by a relative who was young at the time. She was alive, and confirmed to me and confirmed to her parents why they loved the Kennedys. by the way. But some of this doesn't get talked about or passed down to the next generation either. I don't know why some of the older black generation don't have these conversations as much as they should. But I specifically sought out a certain individual separate, and I asked questions. This other individual that I know that was alive closer to this time period, by the way, or was very young, someone else separately that I know who was the equivalent of a 5-star or 4-star historian, very knowledgeable. And they told me at the time what should have happened, but Martin Luther King, he was trying to do the best that he could during that time period. And by the way, he was registered as a Republican, by the way, and he applied for a gun purchase permit, by the way. A lot of people that doesn't get talked about, because some people argue if Martin Luther King was alive today, which would he be a liberal or would he be a Republican or whatever? We will never know. But you have to ask the question, which version of Martin Luther King would you get? Because also before he passed away, before he was killed, by the way, let me say, before he was murdered, he spoke against the establishment, by the way. Understand this. I saw the video footage. I don't know what documentary it is, because someone asked me, a sister who was subscribed to my channel, and I let her know through text. I don't remember. I don't know the name of the documentary, but I did see it. I could possibly, I have to look on one of my backup hard drives. I don't know if I was able to download it, but I know YouTube has some good videos, because they sure do like removing a lot of stuff. You know, all types of history, you know, old clips and stuff on there, like different stuff like the Zapruder film, different activists, you know, Malcolm X, etc., Malik El Shabazz, a lot of Medgar Evans. They have a lot of different educational clips. And this was a clip that I saw, and Martin Luther King said at this particular one of his last speeches, I believe it was, because I found out that my great grandfather helped construct, was the building commissioner behind the church that Martin Luther King gave his last speech at, Mason Temple in Memphis, Tennessee. Because I was brought up, I was Church of God in Christ. That was the main denomination on my father's side. By the way, my grandparents were Baptists. That's like my mother's side, by the way. And I found out my great grandfather, that church that Martin Luther King gave his last speech at before he was murdered, killed, was Mason Temple. And I don't know if it was at that speech, but the clip that I saw, he specifically said, it was video footage from it, and he said something along the lines, I don't care what other black leaders that this offends, but I'm gonna, he basically, I'm gonna translate, don't quote me on his exact words, but he said, I'm basically gonna tell the truth, I'm gonna speak my mind about what's going on. So he really woke up. So that's another thing. When people say if Martin Luther King was alive today, which side would he support? Which version of Martin Luther King would you have? Because before he was killed, he went against the establishment. And that's why Lyndon Baines Johnson was quoted on record to this documentary talked about, and started calling King the N-word preacher. Remember, just prior, Martin Luther King had won the Nobel Peace Prize, by the way. But after Martin Luther King started speaking against the Vietnam War, by the way, and some of you all know, it's big money in those wars, by the way, real big money in those wars that send innocent young men and women to, funded by the Rothschilds, the central banking system, the Federal Reserve. Oops, did I drop some tidbits? Did I drop some hints right there? Oh, go check out the movie Money Masters and Monopoly Man. Or you might say, oh, I see now, Dorsey, why you always mention that movie Monopoly Man and Money Masters all the time. It's some other documentaries, Ring of Power, Empire of the City, that you might still be able to find and watch for free on YouTube. Download it while you can. And why is the left, why is YouTube trying to censor, trying to remove all this stuff? Because they don't want you to have the evidence. Mighty suspect, huh? If they really weren't the party of slavery, by the way, the party of Jim Crow, you know the real history of the Democratic Party. The Republicans, Frederick Douglass was a Republican. Abraham Lincoln was a Republican. Republicans were the abolitionists who fought to end slavery. It was the Democrats after slavery that fought and tried to re-enslave black people. Know your history. The Democratic Party was heavily controlled in the South, the Deep South, as they called it. And the show Eyes on the Prize I used to watch with my parents growing up on PBS. Go look it up. Going into the early 1900s, by the way, Black Wall Street, Tulsa, Oklahoma, I found one article that blamed the Democratic Party was responsible for burning down Black Wall Street. Why don't you hear about this history? I read in the article, you can look it up online. Don't take my word for it, but research several articles. Don't take Dorsey's word for it, and check with your historians, qualified. Not someone who's going to push just leftist talking points, but some stuff might be uncomfortable or may be contrary to what you've been taught. But the real truth is Democratic Party, the Democrats voted for the Jim Crow laws, where blacks, remember, they couldn't use certain restrooms and bathrooms, and that was part of the black codes. The Democrats, I found out, created the black codes, by the way. And the state of Mississippi created their own black codes, by the way, separately. Look it up. Yes, because I heard a brother, I was on a call some years ago, and I said, let me do my research, because I said I don't see this coming from the Republican Party. But it's going on in a different form where the Democrats are trying to basically re-enslave black people and minorities, and this goes for the Latin population as well, and keep us on the plantation. Just like Nancy Pelosi holding up these stimulus checks. Had she in the House agreed with the bipartisan bill, people, they would have had the $400 unemployment where Trump wouldn't have had to do an executive order. They would have gone out already. But you go back into the history of the Democratic Party, they don't talk about the other side. I'm not saying the Republicans are perfect. Like, oh, my man over here, he caping for the Republicans. No, that's not what this is about. What you need to do is study your history. Know your history. There's a saying my history teacher taught us years ago where Martin Luther, not talking about Martin Luther King, but the monk from the Catholic Church that started the Protestant movement. That's why you have the Pentecostal denomination comes out of the Protestant movement. They protested, like the Methodist movement. Methodist churches meant they had another method. And you Lutheran churches, the Lutheran, which it was named after, but Martin Luther, the monk that went up against the Catholic Church and made a quote that those who do not learn from their history are condemned to repeat it. By the way, just something to keep in mind. Okay, let me read some of the, looks like we got some more comments in here. Okay, Anthony Simmons says, there is definitely something about to go down. Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and even IG have gone on massive censorship campaign, meaning somebody has something to hide and don't want the truth exposed. Facts. Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it. Confirmation. That's facts. Sandra Week says, Gary, Indiana school system got hijacked. Okay, thank you, Sandra, for that. See, it's not a coincidence, by the way. And that lady I was speaking to at that event, my friend took me to as a guest, it was a Preppers Expo in Michigan, by the way. This was a couple years ago, not last year, but I think we went the year before last. I think it was 2018. And yeah, she told me where that money goes to, how they were laundering that money. But I told the other story firsthand, how one of my relatives, she knew someone who worked for the school board years ago. And it's not a coincidence why this goes on, and there's a connection with these public schools. And I saw a talk show host report on this as well, how that money from the public school system gets laundered into the Democratic Party. And these schools get ran down. It's not a coincidence. You look at Baltimore. Gretchen Helm says, peace and blessings, fire at Dorsey Resource. Thank you, Gretchen. Appreciate you for confirmation. Gretchen Helm says, maybe Eyes on the Prize documentary. Yeah, Gretchen, that was also a TV show, by the way. I think they may have made it into like a documentary or like a movie, kind of like a series. It documented a lot of the history during the civil rights movement. Was shown on PBS. By the way, you can watch some of the clips, I believe, are on YouTube. I just discovered recently because I like the song from years ago that they had. I recently wanted to check that out. Anthony Simmons says, so many examples of blacks being Republican, holding office way back to the 1800s, and everything bad that happened to them was perpetrated by Democrats. He says, look up the Wilmington North Carolina story. Okay. I haven't heard, I may have heard about it, but I didn't know too much about that history because of activists that I follow or different activists may have mentioned something, but I would have to look that up. Thank you for that information, Anthony. And also thank you for confirming, by the way. Wilmington, North Carolina story on the History Channel here on YouTube also about white supremacy hijacking a government. Okay, I have to check that out when I get a chance. Make sure you leave a comment as well, or just if you see my email, you can email me that information so I don't forget. In case, like you guys, if you want me to, if there's something you want me to check out, understand I can't. When I'm doing a video live, I don't go back. Sometimes I'll go back and watch them, but just keep in mind I don't know because it may hurt. I think my my AdSense revenue. I think you can't be. I have to find out. It's been some years since I researched this. If you content creators, if you can watch your own, like if you're logged into your own account, it's like kind of like game. It would be like gaming the system. So I don't go in and I have to probably do it a certain type of way to watch my own videos to remember some of what you guys share with me. But appreciate the info that you guys do share and provide the links with. So Gretchen Helm says, I just recently saw that at Anthony Simmons. Okay. Anthony Simmons says, right on time, Dorsey. Democrats burned down and tore up Wilmington, North Carolina also. Rioted, ran blacks out of town, and ran Republicans out of office with violence. Okay. All right. Well, thank you for giving me the gist of that story. I can see that. Because once again, as I was discussing, I found just one article. I bookmarked it that talked about, because remember, with Tulsa, Oklahoma, the Democrats started. It was members of the Democratic Party that organized and created the KKK. I also found out from an article the DNC, Democratic National Convention, of the people that run that some years ago. They had set forth to intentionally cover up this history, by the way, which is very hypocritical because the same leftist, progressive, liberal party will go back 10 years on somebody's Twitter profile over something they said and vilify them like they did, with the comedian Kevin Hart, by the way, and wanted him to say, do you disavow? But they won't go back and disavow their egregious role that the Democratic Party played in white supremacy. Well, they always want to point the finger, and say it's Trump this or he's inciting this, but they won't go back and explain the history to all of their Democratic supporters, all of their liberal leftist supporters, constituents, of their egregious role that they played in slavery and torture and murder of black people, African Americans, and how the Democratic Party voted for the Jim Crow laws. By the way, look it up. This was evidence in the book. This is why they didn't want Minister Farrakhan some years ago. And I'm not getting no endorsement and sharing this information, by the way, guys. Just on a side note, I'm not being paid just as a content creator. I've done my research, but this was in the book, and this is why I wanted to get the book, The Secret Relationship Between Blacks and Jews. By the way, part 2 deals with their involvement with the Democratic Party that voted for the Jim Crow laws. By the way, remember where blacks couldn't use certain restrooms, bathrooms, they had to use ones that said color. By the way, that was the Democratic Party. Why haven't they come out and disavowed these things in their role? It's just things are going on in a slightly different form today. Some call it the welfare state. Well, remember, Lyndon Baines Johnson tweaked the Civil Rights Bill of 1965, and with the entitlement programs, they called it that. Those were under the that's when we should have received reparations. That was just a temporary band-aid. When this elder that I spoke to that wired me up on the real facts that I mentioned is equivalent of a 5-star historian that's seen the pyramids in Egypt. By the way, has been on the Ashwaquazi tour, and to go on that tour costs like several $1,000s. And I remember at the time when I met Michael Imhotep from the African History Network, he knew about the tour, but he hadn't even been on the tour, but had referenced it to another sister. So that means my connection that I had was very well studied,